Welcome to the Pursuit Chronicles, where tales of adventure, discovery, and passion unfold through every inspiring journey. The iron gates of the Langley estate loomed like silent sentinels, their intricate designs a testament to a lineage that stretched back centuries. As the sleek silver car glided up the winding driveway, Ethan Langley sat in the back, his eyes tracing the familiar contours of his childhood home. The sprawling mansion, with its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys, stirred a quiet ache in his chest, a blend of nostalgia and the heavy mantle of legacy. He had spent years away, forging his fortune in distant cities, transforming the Langley name into a global empire. Now he was returning, not just as a prodigal son, but as a husband. Beside him, Victoria sat with the poise of a queen, her perfectly manicured nails tapping lightly against her phone. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her emerald eyes scanned the estate with a critical gaze. Marrying Ethan had been her crowning achievement, a union that promised wealth and prestige beyond her wildest dreams. Yet, as the mansion came into view, her lips tightened. It was grand, undeniably, but to her it reeked of old money, stiff, outdated, and in desperate need of her modern touch. Ethan noticed the shift in her expression, but chose silence. Victoria's opinions were often sharp, and he had learned to let them pass unchallenged, especially when they concerned aesthetics. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, and she rarely failed to get it. As the car slowed before the grand entrance, the estate's staff stood in a neat line, their faces a mix of familiarity and deference. Ethan's eyes scanned the group, searching for one figure in particular. Before he could step out, the massive oak doors swung open, revealing his aunt Eleanor and his cousin Marcus. Eleanor, with her silver hair and piercing gaze, was the family's unyielding matriarch, the keeper of the Langley legacy. Marcus, ever the jester, wore a grin that promised mischief. Ethan stepped out, smoothing his tailored jacket, then offered a hand to Victoria. She emerged with practiced grace, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestone path. Her gaze swept over the staff, lingering with detached curiosity. Eleanor spoke first. "Ethan, it's been too long." Her voice was warm but carried the weight of authority. She glanced at Victoria, offering a nod. "And this must be your wife," Ethan smiled. "Aunt Eleanor, Marcus, this is Victoria." Victoria extended a hand, her smile polished to perfection. "A pleasure to meet you, both. Ethan speaks of you often." Eleanor shook her hand, her eyes assessing. Marcus, with a playful smirk, took her hand lightly. "Welcome to Langley Manor, Victoria. Hope you're ready for the full experience." Victoria's smile tightened. "It's certainly historic." Ethan's gaze drifted past them, landing on her, Lillian. She stood slightly apart from the others, her presence quiet but commanding. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back neatly, and her simple uniform was immaculate. The lines on her face told of years endured, but her eyes held a warmth that pierced Ethan's heart. She was the woman who had raised him, who had bandaged his scraped knees and soothed his childhood fears. To him, she was more than a housekeeper. She was home. "Lillian," he said, his voice soft but heavy with emotion. Her face lit up, a smile breaking through her composed exterior. "My boy," she replied, her voice steady yet full of unspoken love. Without hesitation, Ethan crossed the distance and enveloped her in a hug. She smelled of lavender and memories, and for a moment he was a boy again, safe in her arms. Lillian patted his back gently, the same way she had when he'd come to her after a nightmare. Victoria watched, her brows lifting slightly. She had never seen Ethan so unguarded, not even with her. His affection for this elderly housekeeper was unexpected. When they parted, Lillian stepped back, studying him. "You've done well for yourself, Ethan," he chuckled. "I hope so, though I bet you'd still scold me if I deserved it." "Without question," she said, a twinkle in her eye. Eleanor observed with quiet approval, but Marcus's gaze flicked to Victoria, noting the faint tightening of her lips. He smirked, sensing a storm brewing. Ethan turned to Victoria, his hand resting lightly on her back. "Lillian, this is my wife, Victoria." Lillian nodded politely. "Welcome, ma'am." Victoria hesitated, then offered a small smile. "Thank you. It's nice to meet you." The handshake was brief, Victoria's. Grip cool and fleeting. Something flickered in Lillian's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Marcus leaned toward Ethan, whispering, "That was frosty." Ethan shot him a look, but Marcus only grinned. As they moved inside, Victoria's gaze swept over the grand foyer, its high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and antique chandeliers. To her, it was a relic, a museum frozen in time. To Ethan, it was a tapestry of memories, each corner whispering of his past, and at the heart of those memories stood Lillian. As the doors closed behind them, Victoria's eyes lingered on Lillian, a silent calculation forming. It was the beginning of something neither Ethan nor Lillian could yet see, but Marcus saw it, Eleanor saw it, and soon Ethan would too. The great hall hummed with quiet activity as evening approached. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over polished floors, and the scent of roasted lamb and rosemary drifted from the kitchen. It was a scene Ethan had known all his life: tradition, family, the comfort of routine. But tonight, a subtle tension threaded through the air, delicate yet undeniable. In the drawing room, Ethan sat by the fireplace, its flames casting shadows across his face. Victoria stood by a grand bookshelf, idly tracing the spine of an old leather-bound volume. She had been quiet since their arrival, her silence not contemplative but judgmental, as if she were cataloging the estate's flaws. "You've been quiet," Ethan said, breaking the silence. Victoria turned, her expression unreadable. "Just absorbing it all. Your home is very traditional," he smiled faintly. "That's a polite way of saying old-fashioned, isn't it?" She didn't deny it, her gaze drifting back to the room. "It has history, I'll give it that. But it feels heavy." Ethan studied her, recognizing the diplomacy in her words. He knew she was holding back, perhaps out of respect for his attachment to this place, or perhaps she was waiting for the right moment to reshape it in her image. A soft knock interrupted them. Lillian entered, her presence as steady as ever. "Dinner is ready," she announced, her voice calm and warm. Ethan nodded, standing. "Thank you, Lillian," Victoria offered a fleeting smile. "Your staff is very efficient," Lillian inclined her head. "We do our best, ma'am." Ethan didn't miss the slight pause before Victoria followed him out. It was subtle, but he had spent years reading people, clients, competitors, family. In that moment, he saw something in Victoria's demeanor that wasn't warmth or even indifference. It was something colder. The dining room was a vision of elegance, the long, mahogany table gleaming under candlelight. Eleanor sat at the head, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Marcus lounged a few seats down, his smirk ever present. Lillian, as always, ensured every detail was perfect before taking her seat, a tradition Ethan had never questioned. To him, Lillian was family, her place at the table as natural as his own, Victoria noticed. Her expression remained neutral as she sipped her wine, or she noticed. For a moment she said nothing, but her eyes lingered on Lillian, calculating. Then she spoke, her tone light but edged. "I didn't expect the staff to dine with the family." The table stilled. Ethan's grip tightened on his fork. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Marcus's smirk widened, sensing drama. Lillian met Victoria's eyes with quiet dignity. "I've been with the Langleys for decades, ma'am. This is how it's always been." Victoria tilted her head, her smile thin. "Interesting. Every family has its quirks, I suppose." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Lillian's more than staff, Victoria. She raised me." "Of course," Victoria said smoothly. "It's just different." Lillian nodded, her face unreadable. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Ethan's business ventures, Marcus's latest antics, but Ethan caught Victoria's eyes on Lillian, studying her with cool detachment. By the time dinner ended, a subtle shift had settled over the room, a tension that hadn't been there before. As the family dispersed, Ethan lingered, watching Lillian collect the last of the glassware. She paused when she saw him, her expression calm but guarded. "She's still adjusting," Ethan said, the words feeling hollow. Lillian nodded. New places take time. But Ethan knew time wouldn't erase what had begun. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken strain. Victoria's remarks grew bolder, her suggestions for modernizing the estate thinly veiled jabs at its traditions, and at Lillian. She proposed moving the staff quarters, updating the decor, and once, in a moment of calculated carelessness, spilled wine on Lillian's uniform during breakfast. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. Lillian cleaned the stain with quiet dignity, but Ethan saw the weariness in her eyes. He should have spoken, should have called Victoria out. But each time, he hesitated. He told himself it was an accident, that Victoria was still settling in, but deep down, he knew better. Eleanor confronted him one afternoon in his study. "You're letting your wife humiliate the woman who raised you," she said, her voice like steel. "Open your eyes, Ethan, before you lose her." The words haunted him, but it was an evening gathering that shattered his denial. The Langleys hosted a grand event to introduce Victoria to their circle, family, friends, and local elites. Victoria shone charming guests with effortless grace. Ethan watched from a distance, a whiskey in hand, marveling at her ability to perform, but his admiration curdled when he overheard her speaking to a small group. "It's quaint, Holding." "Onto the past," Victoria said, her voice smooth. "But some things, some people, are relics. They don't belong in a modern home." A guest chuckled nervously. "You mean the housekeeper?" Victoria sipped her wine, letting the silence speak. Ethan's blood ran cold. Across the room, Lillian stood frozen, a tray in her hands. For a moment their eyes met, and Ethan saw it, pain, raw and unguarded, before she masked it. He moved before he could think, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Enough," the group turned. Victoria's smile didn't falter. "Darling, we were just—" "I said enough," Ethan snapped, his tone final. He turned to Lillian, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry," she nodded once. "I should return to my duties, sir." As she walked away, Ethan faced Victoria. "You humiliated her." "I did no such thing," she replied, her eyes narrowing. "You knew who you married, Ethan." The truth of her words hit like a blade. He had known, or at least he should have. And now he had to face the consequences. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Victoria's words echoed in his mind, but it was Lillian's silence that cut deepest. He had failed her, the woman who had been his anchor, his confidant, his family. Wandering the halls, he found himself outside her quarters. The door was ajar, a suitcase packed beside it. "You're leaving," he said, his voice breaking as Lillian appeared, dressed in a traveling coat. She nodded. "It's time." "You don't have to go," he pleaded. "This is your home." "Is it?" Lillian's voice was gentle but firm. "A home is where you're valued, Ethan. I raised you, loved you as my own. But I've been treated like nothing by her and by your silence." The words burned. Ethan swallowed hard. "I was a coward." Lillian studied him, then placed a hand on his cheek. "Prove you're not. Not with words, but with actions." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I will." She stepped back, picking up her suitcase. "Then I'll wait to see." As she walked away, Ethan felt the weight of his failure, but something else stirred. A memory. A story Lillian had told him as a child, about a mother who lost her son, searching for him across years and continents. It had always felt like a fairy tale, but now it gnawed at him. The next morning, Ethan confronted Victoria in their bedroom. "Pack your things," he said, his voice steady. "You're leaving." Her laughter was sharp, disbelieving. "Over a housekeeper?" "Over you," he corrected. "Over everything I let you do." Victoria's face hardened, but Ethan was done. As she stormed out, he felt a weight lift, but the work wasn't finished. He sought Eleanor, who revealed a truth that shattered him. Lillian was his mother. She had given him up as a young woman, unable to provide for him, and Eleanor had taken him in, swearing Lillian to secrecy to protect the Langley name. Lillian had stayed, serving the family, watching her son grow from afar, her love silent, but unwavering. Ethan's world tilted. The woman he'd called family was his blood, and he'd let her be broken. Ethan walked to Lillian's cottage, the path lined with oaks that whispered memories of their time together. She opened the door, her expression guarded but soft. "I let you down," he began, sitting across from her. "I saw her hurt you, and I did nothing, but I know the truth now. You're my mother." Lillian's eyes widened, then softened with tears. "Eleanor told you." "Why didn't you?" he asked, his voice raw. "I wanted you to have a life." "I couldn't give," she said. "But I never stopped loving you." Ethan took her hand. "You're my family. Come home." Lillian hesitated, then nodded. "We'll see, my boy." They returned to the estate together, the halls lighter, the air warmer. Lillian resumed her place, not as a servant, but as Ethan's mother, her dignity restored. The Langleys embraced her, and for the first time, Ethan felt whole. As they stood on the balcony watching the sunset, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. He had his mother back, and he would spend his life proving he deserved her love. Thetim. Langley Estate basked in the soft glow of morning, its ancient walls seeming to breathe easier under the weight of truth unveiled. The oppressive tension that had clung to the halls for weeks had dissipated, replaced by a tentative warmth, like the first rays of sunlight after a long winter. Ethan stood at the edge of the grand balcony, his hands resting on the stone balustrade, gazing out at the rolling lawns and distant oaks. The world felt different now, sharper, more vivid, as if the revelation of Lillian's true identity had stripped away a veil he hadn't known he was wearing. Behind him, the faint clink of porcelain signaled Lillian's presence. She approached, with a tray setting it on the wrought iron table nearby. 2 steaming cups of tea sat beside a plate of freshly baked scones, their buttery aroma mingling with the crisp morning air. Lillian moved with the same quiet grace that had always defined her, but there was a subtle shift in her posture, a lightness as if the burden of her secret had finally been lifted. "You didn't have to do this," Ethan said, turning to face her. His voice was soft, tinged with a mix of gratitude and guilt. Lillian smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Old habits, my boy. Besides, I've always found a good cup of tea sets the day right." He chuckled, but the sound was bittersweet. The word boy carried a new weight now, a reminder of the years they'd lost, the bond they could have shared if not for the choices made long ago. He took a seat across from her, his fingers wrapping around the warm cup, grounding himself in its familiar heat. For a moment they sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand words but invited them. Ethan studied her, the silver streaks in her hair, the lines etched by time and sacrifice, the steady warmth in her gaze. She was his mother, and yet he was only beginning to know her. "I keep thinking about all the times I should have asked," he said finally, his voice low. "All the moments I felt you were more than just Lillian. Why didn't I see it?" Lillian's expression softened, but there was no trace of reproach. "You weren't meant to see it, Ethan. I made sure of that. I wanted you to grow up, with every opportunity, not the shadow of my past." "But you stayed," he pressed, his brow furrowing. "You could have left, started over somewhere else. Why endure it all? Serving, watching from the sidelines?" She took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes drifting to the horizon. "Because you were here. Every scraped knee, every late-night story, every triumph and heartbreak, I was there. That was enough? Ethan's throat tightened. He set his cup down, leaning forward. It shouldn't have been enough. You deserved more. You deserved to be my mother, not my housekeeper. Lillian reached across the table, her hand resting gently over his. I was your mother, Ethan, in every way that mattered, and now we have time. Her words were a balm, but they couldn't erase the ache of what might have been. He nodded, his jaw tight, vowing silently to make up for every lost moment. The sound of footsteps broke the quiet. Eleanor appeared at the balcony's entrance, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She carried herself with the same regal authority, but her expression was softer today, her sharp edges tempered by the events of the past days. Good morning, she said, her voice carrying a rare warmth. She glanced between Ethan and Lillian, a flicker of approval in her eyes. I see you're settling in. Lillian inclined her head. As best I can, Eleanor. Eleanor took a seat, her gaze settling on Ethan. The staff's been talking. They're relieved, you know. Victoria's departure has lifted a weight from this house. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. Victoria. Her name still stirred, a complex knot of emotions, anger, regret, and a lingering sense of betrayal. He had loved her, or thought he had. But love, he was learning, couldn't thrive on pretense or cruelty. I should have seen her for who she was sooner, he admitted, his voice steady but heavy. I let her hurt you, Lillian. I let her hurt this family. Lillian's hand tightened briefly on his. You made it right, Ethan. That's what matters. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but her tone was measured. You did what was necessary, Ethan. But don't think this ends with her leaving. The Langley name carries weight, and people will talk. You need to be prepared. Ethan nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Victoria's exit would not go unnoticed. She was a woman of influence, with connections in high society and a knack for spinning narratives. He could already imagine the whispers, scandals about a failed marriage, questions about why the new mistress of Langley Manor had been cast out, but none of that mattered as much as the woman sitting across from him. I'll handle it, he said firmly. But first, I need to make sure this house is a home again, for all of us. Lillian's smile was small but genuine. It's already starting to feel that way. The days that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding. Lillian resumed her presence in the estate, not as a servant but as Ethan's mother, her role acknowledged by the family and staff alike. The transition was not without its challenges. Some of the younger staff, accustomed to her as the housekeeper, hesitated in their interactions, unsure of how to address her. But Lillian's quiet dignity smoothed the way, her warmth disarming, even the most uncertain. Ethan, meanwhile, threw himself into learning about her life, the years before she came to Langley Manor, the sacrifices she had made. Late evenings found them in the library, poring over old letters and photographs, piecing together a past that had been hidden from him. Lillian spoke of her youth in a small coastal town, of a love lost too soon, of the moment she realized she couldn't provide for her newborn son. Her voice was steady, but Ethan saw the pain in her eyes, the weight of choices no one should have to make. You never stopped looking for me, did you? He asked one night, holding a faded photograph of a young Lillian, her face bright with hope. She shook her head. Never. When Eleanor offered to take you in, I knew it was the best chance you had, but I couldn't stay away. I came to the estate as a maid, just to be near you. Ethan's chest ached. I wish I'd known. Lillian touched his hand. You know now. That's enough. But it wasn't enough. Not for Ethan. He wanted to give her the life she'd been denied, to honor the love that had carried her through decades of silence. He began making plans, quietly, without fanfare, to ensure her comfort, her security, her place in the family. He consulted with Eleanor, who, despite her stern demeanor, showed a fierce protectiveness toward Lillian, her old friend, and now her sister-in-law in spirit. Marcus, true to form, brought levity to the process. So, do we call her Aunt Lillian now, or just stick with Your Majesty? he teased over breakfast, earning a rare laugh from Lillian. "You'll call me whatever keeps you out of trouble," she replied, her eyes twinkling. But not all was peace. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of Victoria's version of events. She had returned to the city, spinning tales of a cold, unwelcoming estate and a husband who had chosen a servant over his wife. The gossip reached Ethan through a business associate who mentioned it casually during a meeting. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, filing the information away. Victoria's words could wound, but they couldn't undo what he had built with Lillian. One afternoon, as Ethan and Lillian walked through the estate's gardens, he noticed a hesitation in her step. She paused by a rosebush, her fingers brushing the petals, her expression distant. "What is it?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. Lillian sighed, her gaze fixed on the roses. "I've been thinking about Victoria. She hurt me, yes, but I can't help wondering, what drove her to it? Was it just cruelty? Or was she afraid of something?" Ethan frowned, surprised by her empathy. "She wanted control. She saw you as a threat to that." "Perhaps," Lillian said softly. "But people lash out when they're hurting, too. I don't excuse what she did, but I wonder if she was fighting her own battles." Ethan shook his head, his voice firm. "Her battles didn't give her the right to hurt you." Lillian smiled, a touch of sadness in her eyes. "No, they didn't. But understanding why might help you let go of the anger." Her words stayed with him, a reminder of the wisdom that had guided him through childhood. Lillian had always seen the world with a clarity he envied, a compassion that tempered justice with mercy. He wasn't ready to forgive Victoria, but he could try to understand for his own sake and for the peace of the home he was rebuilding. The Langley estate was preparing for another gathering. This time a celebration of Ethan's recent business success, a merger that had solidified the Langley Empire's dominance in the tech industry. It was also an opportunity to reintroduce Lillian, not as a servant but as Ethan's mother, to the wider circle of family and friends. The event was to be grand, with chandeliers polished to a gleam, tables laden with delic personally overseen by Eleanor. Ethan felt a mix of pride and apprehension. This was a chance to honor Lillian publicly, to show the world the woman who had shaped him. But it was also a risk. Victoria's rumors had spread, and some guests might arrive with questions, their loyalties divided. He confided his concerns to Marcus over a late-night whiskey in the study. "She's got half the city believing you're some heartless tyrant," Marcus said, swirling his glass. "But you've got the truth on your side. And Lillian. That's worth more than any gossip." Ethan nodded, but the weight of the upcoming event pressed on him. "I just want her to feel safe here. She's been through enough." Marcus leaned back, his smirk softening. "She's tougher than you think, cousin. And she's got you now. That's all she ever wanted." The night of the gathering arrived, the estate aglow with light and laughter. Guests arrived in waves, their voices filling the great hall with a symphony of chatter. Lillian stood at Ethan's side, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her silver hair swept into a graceful bun. She was nervous, Ethan could tell, but she carried herself with the same quiet strength that had sustained her through years of hardship. As the evening progressed, Ethan watched her charm the guests with her warmth and wit. She spoke of the estate's history, shared stories of Ethan's childhood, and deflected questions about her past with graceful ease. To those who didn't know the truth, she was simply a beloved figure in the Langley household. To those who did, she was a revelation, a mother reclaimed, a wrong righted. But the harmony was short-lived. Midway through the evening, Ethan noticed a stir near the entrance. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and he turned to see Victoria standing in the doorway, her presence like a sudden frost. She was dressed in a striking red gown, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile sharp and calculated. Beside her stood a man Ethan recognized, a journalist with a reputation for scandal. Ethan's heart sank. He felt Lillian stiffen beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "Stay calm," she whispered, her voice steady. Victoria approached, her eyes locking onto Ethan's. I wasn't invited, but I thought I'd drop by, she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. After all, I'm still part of this family, aren't I? The journalist hovered nearby, his notepad ready, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Guests whispered, their gazes darting between Ethan, Victoria, and Lillian. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but firm. You're not welcome here, Victoria. Her smile didn't falter. Oh, Ethan, don't be so dramatic. I just wanted to see how the estate's faring without me, and to meet this remarkable woman everyone's talking about. Her gaze slid to Lillian, sharp and predatory. Lillian met her eyes, unflinching. You've seen enough, I think, she said, her voice calm but laced with steel. This is a night for family. You don't belong here. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Family? Is that what you call it? A servant turned matriarch? How quaint. The words hung in the air, venomous. Ethan felt a surge of anger. But before he could speak, Lillian stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. I am Ethan's mother, she said, her voice ringing clear. I've loved him every day of his life, even when I couldn't claim him. You, Victoria, have no claim. Here, not on him, not on this house, not on the truth. The room fell silent. Victoria's composure cracked, her eyes narrowing. The journalist scribbled furiously, but Ethan didn't care. He moved to Lillian's side, his hand resting on her shoulder. You heard her, he said, his voice steady. Leave, now. Victoria hesitated, her gaze flickering between Ethan and the crowd. The journalist, sensing the tide turning, stepped back. With a final, venomous look, Victoria turned and swept out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The sea. Guests erupted into murmurs, some shocked, others approving. Ethan felt Lillian's hand tremble slightly, but when he looked at her, she was smiling, a small, triumphant smile. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. She squeezed his hand. Yes, I did. For both of us. The aftermath of Victoria's appearance was a storm of whispers, but it passed quickly. The journalist's story, when published, focused not on scandal but on Lillian's courage, her quiet strength, and the love that had bound her to Ethan across decades. The Langley name emerged stronger, its legacy not of wealth but of loyalty and redemption. Ethan and Lillian grew closer, their days filled with shared moments, walks in the garden, evenings by the fire, stories of the past and dreams for the future. Lillian began to take a more active role in the estate, not as a servant, but as a guiding presence, her wisdom shaping its future. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, welcomed her input, and even Marcus admitted with a grin that she was the best thing to happen to this place in years. One evening, as they sat in the library, Ethan handed Lillian a small, leather-bound book. I found this in the attic, he said. It's yours. She opened it, her breath catching. It was a journal filled with her handwriting. Notes from her early days at the estate, thoughts about Ethan, hopes for his future. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned the pages, each one a piece of her heart preserved. You kept me close even then, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Lillian closed the book, holding it to her chest. Always. The Langley estate thrived, its halls filled with laughter and light. Ethan knew there would be challenges ahead. Business rivalries, societal expectations, the lingering echoes of Victoria's spite. But with Lillian by his side, his mother in every sense, he felt ready to face them. As they stood on the balcony one golden evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ethan took her hand. This is home, he said simply. Lillian squeezed his hand, her smile radiant. Yes, my boy, it is. The Langley estate settled into a rhythm of renewal, its grand halls echoing with a warmth that had been absent for too long. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting golden patterns across the polished floors, and the scent of blooming jasmine from the gardens drifted through open doors. Ethan found himself waking each day with a sense of purpose, grounded by the presence of Lillian, His mother, no longer a shadow, but a cornerstone of his life. Lillian had taken to her new role with quiet confidence. She no longer wore the uniform of a housekeeper, instead choosing simple but elegant dresses that reflected her understated grace. She moved through the estate with an ease that belied the decades she had spent in service, offering guidance to the staff, sharing stories with guests, and advising Ethan on matters both personal and professional. Her wisdom, once confined to the margins, now shaped the heart of the household. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan found her in the library, seated at a mahogany desk with a stack of old ledgers spread before her. The room was bathed in soft light, dust motes dancing in the air, and the faint creak of the floorboards under Ethan's steps broke the silence. "Caught you working," he teased, leaning against the doorframe. Lillian looked up, a smile tugging at her lips. "Just looking through some history. This estate has stories even I don't know." Ethan crossed the room, peering over her shoulder. The ledgers were records of the estate's early years, detailing purchases, events, and the names of those who had served the Langleys. His eyes caught on a familiar name, Lillian's, listed as a young maid hired decades ago. The sight stirred a pang in his chest, a reminder of the life she had lived for him. "What are you looking for?" he asked, pulling up a chair. She traced a line in the ledger with her finger. "I was thinking about the people who came before us, the ones who built this place, who kept it alive. I want to honor them, Ethan, not just for me, but for everyone who's been part of this family." Ethan nodded, understanding her intent. "A memorial, maybe? Or a record of their stories?" "Something like that," she said, her eyes bright. "This house isn't just stone and wood, it's the lives that have passed through it. I want that to be remembered." The idea took root, and over the next few days, Ethan and Lillian began planning a project to document the estate's history, not just the triumphs of the Langley family, but the contributions of its staff, from gardeners to cooks to maids. Like Lillian, they enlisted Marcus, whose knack for storytelling proved invaluable, and even Eleanor, who surprised them with her meticulous knowledge of the estate's archives. But as the project gained momentum, shadows from the past began to resurface. Victoria's departure had not silenced her influence, and her rumors had taken on a life of their own. A letter arrived one morning, its crisp envelope bearing the seal of a prominent law firm. Ethan opened it in his study, his jaw tightening. As he read, Victoria was suing for a portion of his assets, claiming she had been wrongfully ousted from the marriage and entitled to compensation for her contributions to the Langley Empire. Eleanor, summoned to the study, scanned the letter with a scowl. "She's grasping at straws," she said, tossing the paper onto the desk. "But she's clever. She'll drag this out, make it public, try to tarnish your name." Ethan rubbed his temples, the weight of the news settling heavily. "She's not after money. She wants revenge." Lillian, who had entered quietly, overheard the conversation. She stood by the fireplace, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Let her try," she said softly. "The truth is stronger than her lies." Ethan looked at her, drawing strength from her resolve. "I won't let her hurt this family again." Lillian nodded, but her eyes held a flicker of concern. "Be careful, Ethan. She knows how to twist things, and she knows how much this house means to you." The lawsuit became a looming cloud, its implications rippling through the estate. Ethan consulted his legal team, who assured him the case was weak, but warned that Victoria's connections could prolong the battle. Meanwhile, the staff whispered about the news, their loyalty to Ethan and Lillian unwavering, but their unease palpable. The estate, once a sanctuary, felt vulnerable again. As autumn deepened, the Langley estate prepared for its annual Harvest Festival, a tradition that drew the local community to its grounds for a day of celebration. The event was a chance to showcase the estate's renewal, to present Lillian as Ethan's mother to the wider world, and to counter Victoria's rumors with the truth of their bond. The lawns were transformed with lanterns, tables laden with local produce, and music drifting through the crisp air. Lillian threw herself into the preparations, her energy infectious. She worked alongside the staff, arranging flowers, tasting. dishes and sharing stories of past festivals. Ethan watched her, marveling at her resilience. She had endured so much: loss, secrecy, humiliation, yet here she was, building a future with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the past. The festival day dawned bright and clear, the estate buzzing with anticipation. Guests arrived from the town and beyond, their laughter mingling with the scent of cider and roasted chestnuts. Lillian moved through the crowd, her presence drawing smiles and warm greetings. To many, she was still the beloved housekeeper who had served the Langleys for decades. To others, she was a revelation, her story a testament to love and sacrifice. Ethan stood by her side, introducing her with pride. "This is my mother, Lillian," he said again and again, each repetition a reclaiming of their bond. The words felt like a shield protecting her from the whispers that still lingered in some corners. But the shield was tested. Midway through the afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the festival grounds. Victoria, dressed in a tailored coat and sunglasses, stood with a small entourage, including the journalist from the previous gathering. Her presence was like a cold wind, chilling the warmth of the day. Ethan's heart sank. He glanced at Lillian, who had noticed Victoria, but remained composed, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Stay with the guests," she murmured. "I'll handle this." Before he could protest, Lillian walked toward Victoria, her steps measured but resolute. Ethan followed at a distance, his pulse quickening. The crowd parted, sensing the tension, their murmurs fading into a hushed anticipation. Victoria removed, her sunglasses, her smile sharp. "Lillian, I didn't expect to see you playing hostess." Lillian met her gaze, unflinching. "This is my home, Victoria. I belong here." "You don't?" Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Your home?" "A servant's. Delusion, nothing more. Ethan may have bought your story, but the world won't." The journalist hovered, pen poised, but Lillian's voice cut through the air, clear and steady. "The world will see the truth. I'm Ethan's mother, and no lie you spin can change that. You tried to break this family, but you failed. Leave, and let us heal." Victoria's composure faltered, her eyes narrowing. For a moment it seemed she might lash out, but the weight of the crowd's gaze, curious, judgmental, supportive, held her in check. She turned to the journalist, her voice low. "Write what you want. I'm done here." With a final venomous glance at Lillian, she walked away, her entourage trailing behind. The journalist hesitated, then slipped away, his notepad empty. The crowd erupted into soft applause, some guests approaching Lillian with words of support. Ethan reached her side, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to face her alone." Lillian smiled, a touch of weariness in her eyes. "I did. Not just for me, but for you. For us." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're stronger than anyone I know." She laughed softly. "I've had years of practice." The festival continued, the shadow of Victoria's appearance fading under the warmth of community and celebration. Ethan and Lillian stood together, watching children play on the lawns, their laughter a reminder of the life they were building. The lawsuit dragged on, but Victoria's case weakened with each passing week. Witnesses came forward, former staff, family friends, even a few of Victoria's own acquaintances, who testified to her cruelty and manipulation. The journalist's article, published shortly after the festival, painted Lillian as a heroine, her story resonating with readers far beyond the Langley estate. Public opinion turned decisively in Ethan's favor, and Victoria's claims began to crumble. Ethan, meanwhile, poured his energy into the estate's history project. The memorial took shape as a garden, its paths lined with plaques honoring the staff who had served the Langleys over generations. Lillian's name was etched at its heart, not as a servant, but as a mother. Her story the cornerstone of the tribute. The garden's opening was a quiet ceremony, attended by the staff, the family, and a few close friends. Lillian stood beside Ethan, her eyes shining with tears as she unveiled the central plaque. "This is for all of us," she said, her voice carrying over the gathered crowd. for the hands that built this home, the hearts that kept it alive. Thank you for letting me be part of it." Ethan wrapped an arm around her, his voice low. "You're the heart of it, Mom." The word, Mom, felt natural now, a bridge across the years of separation. Lillian leaned into him, her smile radiant. The estate thrived, its legacy no longer defined by wealth alone, but by the bonds that held it together. Eleanor softened, her stern demeanor giving way to a quiet pride in Ethan and Lillian's resilience. Marcus, ever the rogue, took to calling Lillian the Queen, a nickname she accepted with a playful roll of her eyes. One evening, as winter approached, Ethan and Lillian sat by the fire in the drawing room, a chessboard between them. The game was a tradition from his childhood, one Lillian had taught him, and now it was a ritual of their new life together. "You're getting better," she said, moving her knight with a sly grin. Ethan laughed, studying the board. "I've had a good teacher." She leaned back, her expression softening. "I never thought I'd have this, Ethan. You here, calling me Mom. It's more than I ever dreamed." He reached across the board, taking her hand. "It's what you deserve. And it's only the beginning." The fire crackled, its warmth enveloping them. Outside, the estate stood strong, its walls a testament to the past and a promise for the future. Ethan and Lillian, mother and son, had reclaimed their place in it, their bond unbreakable, their home whole at last. Winter draped the Langley estate in a soft blanket of frost, the sprawling lawns glistening under the pale morning light. The grand mansion stood resolute, its chimneys trailing wisps of smoke into the crisp air, a symbol of endurance through seasons and storms. Inside, the warmth of crackling fires and the scent of cedar filled the halls, weaving a sense of comfort that had become the estate's new heartbeat. Ethan Langley felt it keenly, a home reborn, anchored by the woman who had given him life. Lillian had settled into her role as the estate's matriarch with a quiet authority that commanded respect, without demanding it. She no longer moved through the halls with the deference of a servant, but with the confidence of a mother who had reclaimed her place. Her days were filled with purpose, overseeing the Memorial Garden project, mentoring the younger staff, and sharing long evenings with Ethan, where stories of her past intertwined with plans for their future. Yet beneath her steady demeanor, Ethan sensed a lingering weight, a reflection on the years lost, perhaps, or a quiet fear that this newfound peace might be fragile. One snowy afternoon, Ethan found her in the conservatory, surrounded by blooming orchids and the soft hum of a heater. She sat on a wicker chair, a leather-bound journal in her lap, her pen poised above a blank page. The conservatory's glass walls framed the winter landscape, creating a cocoon of warmth amid the cold. "Writing your memoirs?" Ethan asked, his tone light as he took a seat beside her. Lillian smiled, setting the journal aside. "Just thoughts. Sometimes they're harder to capture than I expect." He studied her, noting the faint lines of contemplation on her face. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the snow-dusted gardens. "I keep thinking about legacy, not just ours, but what we leave behind for others. This estate, these stories, they're more than our history. They're a responsibility." Ethan nodded, understanding her meaning. The Langley name had always carried weight, but Lillian's presence had redefined it. No longer was it solely about wealth or power. It was about the people who had built it, the sacrifices that had sustained it. Her memorial garden was a testament to that, but Ethan sensed she wanted to do more. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. "The festival showed us how much this place means to the community. Maybe it's time we gave back in." "A bigger way," Lillian's eyes brightened. "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation," he said, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Something to support the town. Education, healthcare, opportunities for those who've been overlooked. We could name it after you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not after me, Ethan, after all of us. The Langley Legacy Foundation, perhaps." The idea sparked a new energy between them. Over the next few days they began sketching out plans, consulting with Eleanor, whose pragmatic insight was invaluable. And Marcus, who brought a surprising knack for community outreach. The foundation would fund scholarships, restore the town's aging library, and provide grants for local businesses, all while honoring the estate's history of resilience and unity. But as the plans took shape, a new challenge emerged. One that tested the estate's newfound harmony. Victoria's lawsuit, though weakened, had not been dismissed. Her legal team had shifted tactics, alleging emotional distress and defamation, claiming Ethan and Lillian's public statements had damaged her reputation. The claims were tenuous, but they kept the case alive, drawing unwanted attention. Local newspapers, once supportive, began publishing speculative pieces, and a few townsfolk, swayed by Victoria's lingering influence, whispered doubts about the Langleys' intentions. Ethan felt the strain during a town council meeting where he presented the foundation's proposal. Most attendees were enthusiastic, but a small group led by a local businessman named Harold Grayson raised pointed questions. Grayson, a longtime acquaintance of Victoria's, suggested the foundation was a publicity stunt to deflect from the lawsuit's truth. "The Langleys have always looked out for themselves," Grayson said, his voice carrying across the room. "Why should we trust this sudden generosity?" Ethan stood, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about publicity. It's about giving back to the community that supported us for generations. My mother, Lillian, has shown me what it means to build something that lasts, not for ourselves, but for others." Lillian, seated beside him, met Grayson's gaze with quiet resolve. "I've lived in this town my whole life, Mr. Grayson. I know its heart, its struggles. This foundation is for the people who've made this place home, just as I have." Her words silenced the room, and even Grayson faltered, his objections losing steam. The council approved the foundation's initial funding, but Ethan knew the battle wasn't over. Victoria's shadow lingered, and her allies would continue to stir doubt. The launch of the Langley Legacy Foundation was set for early spring, timed to coincide with the estate's annual renewal celebration, a smaller, more intimate event than the Harvest Festival, focused on the family and close community allies. The event would mark the foundation's first scholarship awards and the unveiling of a restored community center funded by the Langleys. Ethan and Lillian poured their energy into the preparations, determined to prove the foundation's sincerity. But tensions in the town grew. Victoria, though absent, had left a network of supporters who spread skepticism about the Langleys' motives. Flyers appeared in local shops, questioning the foundation's transparency and hinting at hidden agendas. Social media buzzed with anonymous posts, some accusing Ethan of using the foundation to buy goodwill amid the lawsuit. The whispers reached the estate, carried by staff who overheard gossip in town, and Ethan felt a growing unease. One evening, as he and Lillian reviewed scholarship applications in the library, Marcus burst in, his usual smirk replaced by a scowl. "You need to see this," he said, tossing a crumpled flyer onto the table. Ethan unfolded it, his jaw tightening. The flyer, printed on cheap paper, featured a grainy photo of Lillian from the festival, with text that read, "From servant to savior? The truth behind the Langley facade." It accused Lillian of manipulating Ethan to secure her unearned place in the family, casting her as an opportunist who had orchestrated Victoria's ousting. Lillian's face paled as she read, but her voice remained steady. "They're trying to tear us apart again." Ethan's hands clenched the flyer, crumpling it further. "This is Victoria's doing. She's not here, but she's still pulling strings." Marcus leaned against the desk, his tone serious. "Grayson's behind the distribution, I'd bet. He's been cozy with Victoria's crowd for years, but it's not just him." "People are scared, Ethan. The lawsuit's got them wondering if they're backing the wrong horse." Lillian set the flyer down, her expression resolute. "Then we show them the truth, not with words, but with actions. The foundation's work will speak for itself." Ethan admired her strength, but the flyer's venom stung. He couldn't shake the image of Lillian's face twisted into a caricature of deceit. She had endured too much to be vilified again, and he vowed to protect her no matter the cost. The next day, Ethan called a meeting with the foundation's board, which included Eleanor, Marcus, and a few trusted community leaders. They agreed to accelerate the community center's opening, hosting a public event to demonstrate the foundation's commitment. Lillian suggested inviting the entire town, not just allies, to foster transparency and rebuild trust. It was a risky move, opening the estate to potential critics, but Ethan trusted her instinct. As the event approached, Ethan and Lillian worked tirelessly, visiting local businesses to secure support, meeting with scholarship recipients, and addressing concerns head-on. Lillian's presence was a quiet force, her sincerity disarming even the most skeptical. At a town hall, when a woman questioned her motives, Lillian responded with a story of her own childhood in the town, her struggles, and her love for its people. The room fell silent, and the woman nodded. Her doubts softened. The community centers. Opening was a crisp spring morning, the estate's grounds transformed with banners, music, and tables laden with food. The restored center, a former schoolhouse on the edge of the estate, gleamed with fresh paint and modern amenities, a library, a computer lab, and spaces for community classes. Scholarship recipients, young students from the town, stood proudly. With their families, their futures brightened by the foundation's support. Ethan and Lillian stood at the center's entrance, welcoming guests. The crowd was larger than expected, a mix of supporters and skeptics, their faces a tapestry of curiosity and hope. Grayson and a few of Victoria's allies lingered at the edges, their presence a reminder of the challenges ahead. Ethan took the stage, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. "This center, this foundation is for all of us," he said. "It's about building a future that honors our past. My mother, Lillian, taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the community that lifts you up, that stands by you. Today, we're standing together." Lillian stepped forward, her gown a soft blue that caught the morning light. "I've called this town home my whole life," she said, her voice warm but unwavering. "I've seen its struggles, its triumphs. This center is a promise to our children, to our neighbors, to ourselves, that we'll keep building, keep loving, keep fighting for what matters." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound drowning out the murmurs of doubt. Grayson's group stood silent, their expressions unreadable, but Ethan saw a shift in the air, a tide turning. As the event continued, Lillian moved through the crowd, speaking with families, listening to their stories. Ethan watched her, his heart swelling with pride. She was more than his mother. She was a beacon, a reminder of what the Langley legacy could be. But the day wasn't without its shadow. Late in the afternoon, a young woman approached Ethan, her expression hesitant. "Mr. Langley, I need to tell you something," she said, glancing nervously at the crowd. "I worked for Victoria's PR team. She's planning something. A new story, something big. She's not done with you." Ethan's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you for telling me. Do you know what she's planning?" The woman shook her head. "Just be careful. She's angry and she's got people watching." Ethan thanked her, his mind racing. Victoria's persistence was a threat, but it also clarified his resolve. He found Lillian by the scholarship table, her laughter mingling with a group of students. He pulled her aside, relaying the warning. Lillian's expression hardened, but her voice was calm. "Let her come. We've faced worse, and we're stronger now." Ethan nodded, drawing strength from her certainty. "Together," he said, taking her hand. "Always," she replied, her smile a promise. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of vigilance and progress. Ethan's legal team uncovered evidence of Victoria's manipulation, emails and recordings that exposed her attempts to fabricate claims. The lawsuit began to collapse, and Victoria's allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be tied to a sinking ship. The community center thrived, its classes and programs drawing families from across the town, and the foundation's scholarships became a beacon of hope. Lillian took on a new role as the foundation's ambassador, traveling to nearby towns to share its mission. Her story of loss, resilience, and reunion resonated deeply, and she became a symbol of what was possible when love endured. Ethan joined her when he could, their shared appearances a powerful statement of their bond. One evening, as they returned from a speaking event, They sat in the estate's drawing room, a fire casting shadows across the walls. Lillian held a letter from a scholarship recipient, a young girl who thanked her for inspiring her to dream big. Tears glistened in her eyes as she read it aloud. "You're changing lives," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like you changed mine." Lillian set the letter down, her smile radiant. "We're changing them together, Ethan. That's what family does." He reached for her hand, the weight of the past months lifting. Victoria's threats still loomed, but they were distant now, overshadowed by the light of what they had built. The Langley estate was more than a home. It was a legacy of love, forged by a mother and son who had found each other against all odds. As the fire burned low, Ethan looked at Lillian, his heart full. "This is just the beginning, Mom." She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "Yes, my boy, and what a beautiful beginning it is." The estate stood strong, its halls filled with the promise of tomorrow. Ethan and Lillian, bound by blood and choice, faced the future together, their legacy a testament to the power of truth and the unbreakable strength of family. Spring gave way to the lush warmth of early summer, and the Langley estate bloomed with vibrant life. The memorial garden, now complete, was a sanctuary of stone paths and blooming roses, each plaque a tribute to the hands that had shaped the estate's history. The community center thrived, its halls filled with laughter and learning, and the Langley Legacy Foundation had become a cornerstone of hope for the town. Ethan Langley walked the estate's grounds with a sense of fulfillment, his mother, Lillian, by his side, her presence a constant reminder of the home they had rebuilt together. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet unease lingered. Victoria's lawsuit, though crumbling, had not been fully dismissed, and the warning from the young woman at the community center's opening haunted Ethan. She had spoken of Victoria's plans for a big story, a final blow to tarnish the Langleys' name. Ethan's legal team worked tirelessly to uncover her intentions, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He shared his concerns with Lillian one evening as they sat in the estate's library, the air heavy with the scent of old books and polished wood. "She's not done with us," Ethan said, his voice low as he stared into the flickering fire. "I can feel it. She's waiting for the right moment." Lillian, seated across from him with a cup of tea, met his gaze with steady resolve. "Let her try, Ethan. We've faced her before, and we're stronger now. The truth is our shield." He nodded, drawing comfort from her certainty, but the weight of her words settled heavily. The truth had carried them this far, but Victoria's cunning was a force to be reckoned with. She had a knack for twisting narratives, for exploiting vulnerabilities. Ethan vowed to protect Lillian, the estate, and the foundation, no matter what came next. The opportunity for vigilance arrived sooner than expected. Marcus, ever the estate's roguish sentinel, burst into the library one morning, a tablet in hand and a scowl on his face. "You need to see this," he said, thrusting the device toward Ethan. The screen displayed a news article from a prominent city outlet, its headline screaming, "The Langley Lie, a Tale of Deception and Betrayal." The piece, written by an anonymous source but bearing Victoria's unmistakable fingerprints, accused Lillian of fabricating her story as Ethan's mother to seize control of the Langley fortune. It painted Ethan as a naive pawn, manipulated by a cunning servant, and suggested the foundation was a front to launder ill-gotten gains. Grainy photos accompanied the text, Lillian in her old housekeeper's uniform, Ethan at the community center's opening, and a distorted image of the memorial garden, captioned as, "A monument to greed. Ethan's blood ran cold." Lillian read the article in silence, her face unreadable, but her fingers tightened around the tablet's edge. Marcus paced, his usual humor replaced by fury. "This is slander, Ethan. She's gone too far." "She's desperate," Lillian said softly, setting the tablet down. "This is her last play, and she's betting everything on it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "She's not just attacking us. She's attacking the foundation, the community, everything we've built." Eleanor, summoned by Marcus, stormed into the library, her silver hair glinting with the firelight. "This is war," she declared, her voice like steel. We fight back, not with lies, but with the truth. We expose her for what she is. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. We need to act fast. The longer this story circulates, the more damage it does. The family convened a strategy session, pulling in the Foundation's board and trusted allies. Lillian proposed a public response. Not just a press release, but a community event to reaffirm the Foundation's mission and their family's integrity. Let the town see us, she said. Let them hear our story, not hers. Ethan admired her courage, but he saw the toll it was taking. The article's venom had reopened old wounds, reminding her of the years she'd been dismissed as just a servant. He took her hand, his voice firm. We'll do this together, Mom. She won't win. Lillian's smile was small but resolute. I know, my boy. The estate buzzed with preparations for an emergency town hall, scheduled at the community center to address the article's claims. The event was open to all, a bold move to confront skepticism head-on. Ethan and Lillian worked tirelessly, gathering evidence to counter Victoria's lies, documents proving Lillian's identity, testimonies from staff and family, and financial records showing the Foundation's transparency. Marcus rallied local supporters, while Eleanor leveraged her network to pressure the news outlet into retracting the story. The day of the town hall dawned gray and overcast, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The community center was packed, its auditorium filled with townsfolk, journalists, and a few of Victoria's lingering allies, including Harold Grayson. Ethan stood at the podium, Lillian by his side, their presence a united front. The crowd was a mix of supportive faces and wary gazes, the article's poison still lingering in some minds. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but resonant. You've all read the story that's been circulating. It's a lie, designed to tear down what we've built together. This foundation, this community center, is about hope, not deception. My mother Lillian is the heart of that hope. She's not a servant who schemed her way into our family. She's the woman who gave me life, who sacrificed everything to see me thrive. He stepped aside, gesturing to Lillian. She took the podium, her blue gown catching the light, her posture regal despite the weight of the moment. I was born in this town, she began, her voice clear and warm. I've walked its streets, shared its joys and sorrows. 30 years ago, I made the hardest choice of my life, to give up my son so he could have a better future. I stayed close, serving the Langleys, loving him from afar. When the truth came out, it wasn't about power or money. It was about family, she paused, her eyes sweeping the room. The article you read was written to hurt us, to divide us. But I know this town's heart. You've seen the Foundation's work, scholarships for your children, a center for your families. That's the truth, and no lie can undo it. The room erupted into applause, the sound swelling like a tide. Grayson and his group sat silent, their expressions shifting from defiance to discomfort. A local teacher stood, her voice trembling with emotion. Lillian, you helped my daughter get her scholarship. You've given us more than words can say. We believe you. One by one, others rose, shopkeepers, parents, students, sharing stories of the Foundation's impact. The journalists scribbled furiously, their focus shifting from scandal to solidarity. Ethan watched, his chest tight with pride and relief. Lillian's truth had cut through the lies, her courage a beacon for the community, but the victory was not complete. As the event ended, a young man approached Ethan, his face pale. Mr. Langley, I have something to show you, he said, handing over a USB drive. I worked for Victoria's team. This has proof of what she did. Emails, recordings, everything. Ethan took the drive, his heart pounding. Why now? The man glanced at Lillian, who was speaking with a group of supporters. Because of her. She's real. Victoria's not. The USB drive was a goldmine. It contained correspondence between Victoria and her legal team, outlining their plan to fabricate the article, as well as recordings of her instructing allies to spread disinformation. Most damning was a video of Victoria admitting her intent to destroy the Langleys out of spite, her voice cold and unrepentant. Ethan's legal team moved swiftly, presenting the evidence to the court and the news outlet. The lawsuit was dismissed, and the outlet issued a full retraction, publishing a new piece that celebrated Lillian's story and the Foundation's work. Victoria's reputation unraveled. Her allies abandoned her, and her social circle, once a fortress of influence, crumbled under the weight of her exposed deceit. Rumors swirled that she had left the city seeking refuge abroad, but Ethan cared little for her fate. His focus was on the future, on Lillian, the estate, and the community they served. The town hall's success marked a turning point. The Langley Legacy Foundation expanded, launching new programs and forging partnerships with neighboring towns. The Memorial Garden became a pilgrimage site, drawing visitors who left flowers and notes of gratitude. Lillian, now a beloved figure, continued her work as the Foundation's ambassador, her story inspiring others to share their own truths. One summer evening, Ethan and Lillian stood in the Memorial Garden, the air sweet with the scent of roses. The central plaque, bearing Lillian's name, gleamed in the fading light. Ethan traced the inscription with his finger, his voice soft. "This is your legacy, Mom. Not just the garden, but everything. The Foundation, the community, us." Lillian's eyes shimmered with tears. "It's our legacy, Ethan. You've made it more than I ever dreamed." He pulled her into a hug, the warmth of her embrace grounding him. "I couldn't have done it without you," she laughed, a sound of pure joy. "And I couldn't have done it without you, my boy." The Langley estate stood as a beacon, its halls filled with the echoes of laughter, love, and resilience. Eleanor, softened by the family's triumphs, took pride in mentoring the Foundation's young leaders. Marcus, ever the jester, launched a storytelling project collecting oral histories from the town to preserve its spirit. The staff, once cautious, moved with confidence, their loyalty to Ethan and Lillian unwavering. Ethan and Lillian's bond grew deeper, their days a tapestry of shared moments, chess games by the fire, walks through the garden, quiet conversations about the past and future. Lillian began writing her memoir, not for publication but for Ethan, a record of her life and love. He read each chapter with reverence, cherishing the pieces of her he was still discovering. One golden afternoon they sat on the estate's balcony, the horizon ablaze with the colors of sunset. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine, and the distant laughter of children from the community center drifted up to them. Ethan held Lillian's hand, his heart full. "This is home," he said, the words a vow. Lillian squeezed his hand, her smile radiant. "Forever, my boy." The estate stretched out before them, its legacy no longer a burden, but a gift. Ethan and Lillian, mother and son, had faced the storms of doubt and deceit, emerging stronger, their love a light that would guide the Langley name for generations. The future was theirs, and it was bright. Summer faded into the golden hues of autumn, and the Langley estate stood as a testament to resilience, its ancient walls imbued with a renewed spirit. The Memorial Garden bloomed with late-season flowers, their vibrant colors a mirror to the life that now pulsed through the estate. The Langley Legacy Foundation had grown beyond the town's borders, its programs reaching neighboring communities, and the community center was a hub of activity, filled with the voices of children, the hum of classes, and the shared dreams of a brighter future. Ethan Langley walked these grounds with a quiet pride, his heart anchored by the woman who had reshaped his world, his mother, Lillian. Lillian had become the estate's heart, her presence a bridge between past and future. She moved through her days with a serene confidence, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her laughter a melody that softened even the sternest corners of the mansion. She continued her work with the Foundation, traveling to share its mission, but her favorite moments were those spent at home, sitting with Ethan in the library, tending to the garden, or simply watching the sunset from the balcony, her hand resting in his. One cool autumn evening, they sat in the drawing room, a chessboard between them, the fire casting a warm glow across the polished wood. The game was a ritual, a thread connecting their past to their present, and Lillian's sly grin as she moved her queen reminded Ethan of the countless lessons she'd taught him: patience, strategy, and the courage to stand firm. "You're letting me win," she teased, her eyes twinkling. Ethan laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Never. You're just too good." She chuckled, but her expression softened, a reflective glint in her gaze. "I've been thinking about time lately, how it slips away, but also how it builds something lasting. This place, this family, it's more than I ever imagined when I first walked through those gates." Ethan studied her, sensing the weight behind her words. "You're thinking about legacy again, aren't you?" She nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the chessboard. "Not just ours, Ethan. The legacy we leave for those who come after. The children at the community center, the families we've helped, they're part of it too. I want them to know they belong to something bigger, something that endures." Her words stirred a deep resonance in Ethan. The Langley name had once been a burden, a mantle of expectation he'd struggled to carry, but Lillian had redefined it, weaving love and sacrifice into its fabric. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "They'll know, Mom, because of you." Lillian's smile was radiant, but there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes. "I won't be here forever, my boy, but I want to leave knowing this home, this family, will carry on." Ethan's throat tightened. The thought of a world without her was unbearable, but he understood her meaning. She wasn't speaking of endings, but of beginnings, of ensuring their work would outlive them. "We'll make sure of it," he promised, "together." The Langley estate prepared for its annual autumn gala, a celebration of the Foundation's achievements and a chance to honor the community's shared journey. This year's event held special significance. It would mark the launch of a new mentorship program, pairing Foundation scholars with local leaders to guide their futures. Lillian had spearheaded the initiative, drawing on her own experiences, to create a framework of support that felt personal, not institutional. The gala was a vision of elegance, the great hall aglow with chandeliers, tables adorned with autumnal flowers, and music weaving through the air. Guests arrived in waves, townsfolk, Foundation beneficiaries, and regional allies, all drawn by the promise of a night that celebrated unity. Lillian stood at the entrance, her gown a deep burgundy that complemented her silver hair, her presence commanding yet warm. Ethan, by her side, introduced her with pride, his voice carrying a quiet reverence. "This is my mother, Lillian." The words never failed to stir him, a reminder of the miracle of their reunion. Lillian greeted each guest with a smile, her stories and laughter drawing them into the estate's embrace. The scholars, dressed in their finest, mingled with mentors, their excitement palpable. Ethan watched a young girl, one of the first scholarship recipients, speak animatedly with a local doctor, her dreams of medical school no longer a distant hope but a tangible path. As the evening progressed, Ethan took the stage, his voice resonating through the hall. "Tonight we celebrate not just the Foundation's work, but the people who make it possible," he said. "My mother Lillian has shown us what it means to build a legacy, not of wealth, but of love, of community, of hope. This mentorship program is her vision, a gift to the next generation." Lillian joined him, her eyes shining as the crowd applauded. "This program is for our children," she said, her voice clear and heartfelt. "It's about giving them the tools to dream, to grow, to know they're never alone. You, this community, are their family now." The applause swelled, and Ethan felt a surge of pride. Lillian's words had woven the crowd together, their shared purpose a shield against the doubts of the past. But as he scanned the room, he noticed a familiar face near the back. Harold Grayson, the businessman who had once championed Victoria's cause. Grayson stood alone, his expression unreadable, and Ethan's instincts sharpened. The man's presence was no coincidence. After the speeches, Ethan approached Grayson, his tone polite but firm. "Didn't expect to see you here, Harold." Grayson offered a tight smile. "I came to see for myself. The Foundation's making waves, Langley. I'll give you that." Ethan studied him, sensing an undercurrent. "And?" Grayson hesitated, then sighed. Victoria reached out last week. Wanted me to stir trouble, keep the old rumors alive. I told her I was done. Ethan's brows lifted, surprised. Why the change of heart? Grayson glanced at Lillian, who was laughing with a group of scholars. Your mother. She's the real deal. I've seen what the Foundation's done for my niece. Got her a scholarship, a mentor. Victoria's lies don't hold up against that. Ethan nodded, a weight lifting. Thank you for being honest. Grayson shrugged, a hint of regret in his eyes. Should have seen it sooner. Good luck, Langley. As Grayson walked away, Ethan felt a sense of closure. Victoria's influence, once a looming shadow, was fading, her allies turning to the light of truth. The gala marked a turning point, but it was a quieter moment that defined the season's end. Lillian, nearing her 70th birthday, expressed a wish to visit her childhood home, a small cottage on the outskirts of the town, long abandoned but still standing. Ethan arranged the trip, sensing its importance, and they drove together through the autumn countryside, the landscape ablaze with reds and golds. The cottage was modest, its stone walls weathered but sturdy, surrounded by an overgrown garden. Lillian stepped out of the car, her eyes tracing the familiar lines of the place where she'd been born. Ethan followed, his heart heavy with the weight of her history, the poverty, the loss, the choice to give him up. This is where it all began, Lillian said, her voice soft. She walked to the garden, kneeling to touch the earth. I used to dream here, Ethan. Dream of a life where I could keep you. He knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. You gave me that life, Mom. And now we're here, together. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. I want to restore this place. Not to live in, but to make it a sanctuary, for others who need a place to dream, to heal. Ethan nodded, the idea sparking instantly. A retreat for the Foundations. Scholars, maybe. A place for them to find their own dreams. Lillian's face lit up. Exactly. They spent the day planning, sketching ideas for the cottage's transformation. By the time they returned to the estate, the project had taken shape. A haven. For young dreamers, named the Lillian Langley Retreat. Ethan hired architects, and Lillian worked with the Foundation's board to secure funding, her passion infectious. The retreat's groundbreaking was a small ceremony, attended by the family, the scholars, and a few community leaders. Lillian stood at the site, a shovel in hand, her burgundy scarf fluttering in the breeze. This is for you, she said, addressing the young faces before her. For your dreams, your futures. Never stop believing in them. Ethan watched, his heart full. The retreat was Lillian's final gift to the world, a testament to her belief in possibility. He joined her, breaking the earth beside her, their shovels turning the soil together. Winter returned, and the Langley estate stood as a beacon of light in the snow-dusted landscape. The Lillian Langley Retreat opened its doors, welcoming its first group of scholars, young artists, scientists, and leaders who found inspiration in its quiet beauty. The foundation continued to grow, its reach extending across the region, and the memorial garden became a place of pilgrimage, its plaques a reminder of the lives that had shaped the Langley legacy. Lillian, though slowing with age, remained the estate's heart. She wrote her memoir, completing it on a snowy evening in the library, her handwriting steady despite the years. Ethan read the final chapter, a letter to him, and wept at its words. You are my greatest dream, my boy. Thank you for making it real. One spring morning, as the estate bloomed with new life, Ethan and Lillian stood in the memorial garden, the air sweet with the scent of lilacs. A new plaque had been added, honoring the scholars who had passed through the retreat, their names a promise of the future. This is it, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. The legacy you wanted. It's alive, Mom. Lillian took, his hand, her smile radiant. It's ours, Ethan, and it will live on long after we're gone. They stood together, mother and son, their bond unbreakable, their home eternal. The Langley estate stretched out before them, its halls filled with the echoes of love, sacrifice, and triumph. The challenges of the past, Victoria's lies, the town's doubts, the weight of truth, had forged something stronger, something lasting. As the sun rose, casting golden light across the garden, Ethan felt a profound peace. The Langley legacy was no longer a name, but a story of a mother who never stopped loving, a son who learned to fight for her, and a community that chose truth over lies. It was a story that would endure, carried by the hands and hearts of those who called this place home, and in that moment, Ethan knew. This was forever. Thank you for joining the Pursuit Chronicles. Keep chasing your dreams and explore new horizons with us.